What's up, everyone? Mikey in the building. Hope you guys are having a great weekend. Wanted to touch base on some volume price analysis, volume relationships to the price, and to levels. All right, Govex on Friday was an amazing play, long and short. But for the long side, I really want to touch base on something that I learned on this 5 minute, reading that this is a 5 minute chart right here, and reading something like this on a heavier name. And what I mean by heavier name is that it has a bigger float, it needs more volume. Okay, if you look right here, this stock right here had 182 mil for the day. It's a lot of volume. It's a bigger float, requires more volume to push it. Okay, but one of the things that I saw right here on Govex, which gave us great conviction in this play, was if you see this nice push up, see the volume that it needed to actually break out, break this high right here and continue to break out and make new highs. And then look what it did when it pulled back. The volume started to dry up tremendously, right? So I think what a lot of people forget to do is to really look left. As we're trading, as we're momentum trading, day trading, you know, volume is everything in that moment for the intraday setups and for what's going on. It's going to help you paint the picture. Okay. Now maybe for large caps it's different. I'm not too sure. I haven't specialized in large cap trading as much. I just really algo trade them, trend trade them. Okay. But for these small caps, when you see certain volume come in and come out, it's going to help you paint the picture of what setup is taking place. Okay, so when you see this and we're watching this Govex just kind of dry up down here, right? The major thing that caught my eye is one, this 272 was a level, a pivot on the daily right here. Okay, so it already got sucked up once with some pretty good increasing volume. If you look right here, 1.7 mil, that's good. It's definitely good. But what happened right here was this was, to me, was getting to an apex point. What's an apex point? It's a point where a chart's going to have to start making a decision. You know, um, what got my attention was this right here. Okay, this is really what got my attention when I started to see this right here. Right, you got this low volume candle right here, and then I started seeing this big increasing volume push right here. Okay, and what I like to do is I look left. I want to see what's going on. And so when I saw this right here, increasing volume pushing that name to make new highs, this is what caught my eye, was this volume candlestick. And I was even mentioning this, in chat, right? Had a nice flag pattern, bigger extended flag pattern, but it was follow the volume. And then what do we get? We get a nice push back up too, with almost a 3 mil candlestick, and this started to break out on some good levels. We needed it first break out of this 289 level, almost a flat top, double top right here, 289, and then we needed to break out over this. Oh, let me then we needed to eventually start breaking out of 294, and then we got our 298 levels right here. Okay, and we were going over here, looking at the one right here. We're kind of seeing how it's getting there. All right. One of the biggest things that this did when this broke out of this level right here, right? It then was bouncing or holding this next pivot, this 289 level. Kind of gave you this, small micro 5 minute flag setup right here. Look at the decreasing volume again. And then what do we get after that? A nice pop of increasing volume. More increasing volume up. And then we get this low volume pullback right here to eventually break out of this new high level, and then we get this stair-stepping volume down for this other flag breakout right here to make new highs. And this new high test right here was this candle right here, which was 338, which is a previous level. So, Govex definitely rallied up. It was in the monkeypox theme. If you can see this daily volume, this is pretty big volume to take into consideration. Okay. Now the fact that this thing, ended up breaking out of the daily at 240s, 250, and then continued, went higher. The next level for us longs is to look for another big level for it to test. And how do we follow that is just this volume. Volume price analysis to the setup to the price action is going to tell you. And then if I remember, when this thing was happening, I was also mentioning in chat that, I have my active trader. This is what my setup is, guys. I had her the other day ask me like, hey, do you only look at the 5? And for the most part, I do. I have the 1 minute up, because it will help me. It'll keep me staying in stock. It'll keep me to see what's going on, to whether to take some profits into a nice volume, increasing volume candle, the drip sell, whatever the case may be. But I get all my entries and stops off this 5 minute chart. So while I'm trading, I use this as my active trader ladder, right? And I use it for my level 2 because it's the same thing over here again. And then time and sales. I want to see big orders go through, um, volume is everything. So if a stock is increasing on light volume and I have all these baby little orders go through, and then I have huge sell orders come in, I know it's time to get out or to probably stay away from the thing. Something that increases on light volume, right, is probably, it's leaning towards the uptrend weakening. All right. Same thing when we get a pullback. That's why when price is declining and volume is declining, the downtrend is starting to weak. So it's very important to understand that when we see these certain 5 minute setups happen. Okay, now if this thing was pulling back on heavy volume, increasing volume, then that means the downtrend is very strong. All right. So this right here is going to help you stay in the trade, keep it on watch, how to understand how to play it. And then for me, when things are starting to break out, I'm looking for that micromanage analysis. And when I mean that by once things start to get going, I want to see these micro pivots hold. I want to see in volume increase over here on the 1. All right. And you do right here when you get the nice volume increase push up right here once this thing's breaking out. All right. And when you see this 5 minute VPA low volume pullback, you're seeing the same thing right here on the 1. Just because the red candles, doesn't mean anything. It's just, some selling going on, people taking profits. That's what we're looking for. All right. So Govex was a great example. All right. And when I was looking back at CMRA, all right, this is before we had it actually right here. All right, CMRA on the daily too. This 343, okay, again was a daily level. Nice pivot right here. So you got this big pop up. This is a 5 minute flag setup. All right, and eventually, first tried it at about 350s. Wanted that to hold, and which is fine. Quick cuts, right? We're day traders. Quick cuts to reposition yourself to a next pivot or a next level. All right. And while this is setting up and pulling back, you got to look left. And what you had is that 343 pivot of intraday high and also a daily pivot. Volume comes in pretty heavy off of it. Buyer step up. Let me pull the 1 minute up so you guys see this too. It's always better to have some confluence going on, right? Talk about confluence all the time, why it's important, and so on. All right. So right here, this dip pulls back, and you see on the one that you had an engulfing 1 minute candle right here on high volume. Okay, look at the pullback on it. 84,000, 83,000, about 84, and then we had 123k 1 minute candlestick to engulf that setup, which right here was your 5 minute hammer. Okay, then we had some action going on right here in the one, which is fine, but once we have a 5 minute entry, a solid 5 minute entry, that's why I don't like getting faked out by all this crazy stuff right here. Okay, I try to follow the chart. I try to trust the chart and the volume that's happening. Okay, moving forward, you see this thing pull back again to 343. Buyers step up again. It's pretty much like this double bottom now. All right, that's happening. It's bouncing off of, but more importantly, it's right here. This thing tried to make highs on big volume and came back on what? On lighter volume. So you had this 200k push, and then you had this, 88, candle, 5 minute candlestick push back, held view up, held these levels right here. It held up the overall pattern and then went to make new highs. And if you see right here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, that we started to get this consistent 100k volume sticks, and now we're starting to move. Look at this. This is where, volume is very big, because yes, the candles might not be, the price action or the range in them might not be so big, but the volume does not lie. And what do we get right here? We get a nice 5 minute flag set up, a nice 5 minute push, nice low volume pullback right here. And when I mean, this is again, when I'm talking about micro pivots, is that this is a pivot right here at 421. Again, just because it broke it doesn't mean it's not going to hold. What you saw is it gets sucked up and then eventually make new highs. All right. Volume is going to help you stay in these plays with what type of pattern or level that is setting up. All right. Don't get too faked out of the 1 minute chart. I like it. I use it as a guidance, but I will base everything off a 5 minute chart when I'm trading, into this intraday setups. Gives you it paints a bigger picture for a smaller time frame, right? We're still trading off small time frames, the 5, the 1. As a momentum day trader, I'm looking for momentum to come in and come out. That way I can enter a trade and take profits, lock it in, and then rinse repeat. All right, consistency is way better than saying, hey, I bought this right here and I held it for, however long, pretty much 4 or 5 hours, and then I hit my target. All right, I don't know how much you can hold or take, what your mental capacity can hold, but I couldn't just enter a stock all day and just wait for it to just miraculously do things. So, as you get more progressed in your trading career, you'll be able to, potentially take more size, so you don't need to look for a huge home run. You can just base your gains off of smaller time frames like I've been doing and let those add up. Okay, so I'm not a swing trader or an intraday swing trader. I will stay in a stock when it's trending off the 5 minute 8 for a pretty long time. All right, but that's a different story. Today, I just really wanted to cover on why VPA, volume price analysis, is so important to the relationship of the setup, the price action, and so on. All right, and in the small cap world, all right, you gotta understand volume, and then you gotta understand how it acts, on this level 2, or right here, however you guys use it. Some people just have that little box level 2, and then they have their set up to buy and sell, which is fine. I like thinkorswim. Sometimes it doesn't show it right here, but that's fine. But it's so important to understand the volume coming into certain price levels, certain levels to break. Where do we need this big volume push to continue? Because like Govex, this was a big one right here. As soon as this was setting up on low volume right here, we wanted to see the table start to turn, right? Once you had this, let me go back to the previous Friday. I mean, you can actually honestly look at any chart and be like, hey, damn, like this is it, you know. But once we saw this low volume consolidation pullback, once we start seeing some ramping volume start to increase, that means there's more buyers stepping up. There's bigger fish playing this. All right, and now it's time to get serious again. Um, we had Govex at 282, pretty much, which was phenomenal because once this thing pulled back right here, um, actually playing this play-by-play was, if you see this right here, right, once we started to get to increasing volume right here, all right, on the 5, once I noticed this, I bought the first pullback. I was able to snag up 282s. All right, that's because, I grabbed like 10, 10, 10. So by then I had an average of 282, but this was the little micro dip right here that got me interested in where I entered, and then I kind of held it for the big push up of breaking 338. All right, here's my example of once you get into an entry, letting it trend off the 5-minute 8. I had a lot of people ask me, what's your targets? Well, what's our targets? Look left, right? We're looking for this 316 crack, and then after that, Govex is obviously trending, right? This is not a backside play, right? What would be backside? I'm going to have another video going on backside plays, why 5-minute flags fail, why their potential of them breaking out is not so significant. But this is still now really big front side play. All right, it's not like this setup is happening way down here, backside, right? Big pop. The stock already did what it did on a daily, broke many levels, and now this is setting up down here. The VPA is all right, but look left. After it broke 316, we look left. Now we're looking for this 338 level. All right, and it did exactly that, and shorts got in pretty heavy, right? It started, definitely hammering it down. Level 2 on this got super heavy, started walking it down, and stuff like that. So, um, to me, this is a nice bear flag, right? Big volume push up, lighter volume push, big volume push down, lighter volume push up. All right. This is where price is rising and volume is declining. All right. That means the uptrend is weakening. All right. So it's the same thing as these 5-minute flags when they pop up. Low volume pullback, downtrend is weakening. And then now we're having this big volume push down, lighter volume push up. All right. Uptrend is weakening. And this thing did, eventually break down. All right. So if this is like, and I'm playing a bull flag that's at 313, I'm entering off the 5-minute 8. All right, and I'm looking for this nice push. Well, you'd be about that 10, 20 something cents, for the breakout, and no continuation. But I mean, even again, look at this VPA on this push up. Lighter volume. Okay, this was pretty big right here, but depending on how this actually set up and formed, right about this is this setup right here. Okay. Remember, this is where I use the 1 minute to help me paint a picture, because we did have some pretty good increasing volume, pretty big volume stuff, right? And then after that stuff, we kind of got some light volume push, another one right here, but then followed by another big volume push down, and then eventually this consolidated, and then this is when we had that Govex and or Saiga, right? Saiga was one of the lead dogs in this, ended up having like some bad news. Then you had some really good fails. All right. But again, volume. All right. What I want you guys to do is to like back test this. I want you to go back, look at a bunch of main runners, and apply the volume price analysis to the setup to the areas, and you're going to see what I mean and see what I'm talking about for bigger picture plays. So when you see this stuff happening in live time, that's when you want to start playing ball. That's when, you potentially want to start adding some risk to your plays. You want to, take the play, and then mind your risk, right? And this is a low risk play. If this doesn't bounce, we can just, cut on the break of, this failing or this level failing, right? But this was a nice daily pivot hold right here. All right, so it was great. All right, but volume will help paint the picture. So don't let that, you know, don't let that not be one of the things that you're mastering while you're trading these patterns or being an intraday day trader. All right, I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday.